Well, at long last, welcome everybody. We are the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I am the Reverend Teri Schwartz, worship minister here in this community. No matter your age, no matter your strengths, your beliefs, no matter who you live with, who you love, whether you're a congregational founder or a first-time visitor, we welcome you here to this community. The mission of the Juneau UU Fellowship is to be a spiritual home for people who are engaged in the search for truth and meaning. We are glad you are here. Today, we gather to honor and commemorate the great leader and prophet, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He told us everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Let our souls be generated by love. Dr. King also said darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So today, let us light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, and the spiracle of radical justice and peace. May its light guide us in the darkness and kindle our hunger for justice. Our opening hymn is Lift Every Voice and Sing. This song, originally a poem written by James Weldon Johnson, an American writer, civil rights activist, and a leader of the NAACP. His brother, John Rosamond Johnson, a composer and singer of the Harlem Renaissance, set it to music. A group of young Black children at a segregated school in Jacksonville, Florida, sang this song to honor Booker T. Washington, a leading African-American intellectual of the 19th century and presidential advisor. The song became popular almost immediately. In 1919, the NAACP dubbed it the African-American National Anthem, and it was one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite hymns. It is not one to be sung lightly, nor one for us white folks, those of us who are to appropriate. As the Black national anthem is always sung at the beginning of an event or worship service, it's a hymn of honor and recognition of how far we have yet to go in the struggle towards justice.
The stadium. At the dawn of the 20th century, America was a country full of promise and hope for many. Black Americans faced a different reality, a nation separate and unequal. Yet their hope persisted. Pained by inequality, but inspired by resilience, writer and civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson put pen to paper. His words would become a unifying call, a hope for a brighter tomorrow, a timeless exhortation to lift every voice and sing.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing a rising sign of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory.
There are forces that want to take us back to another place. We don't want to go back. We want to go forward.
Let's join in the meditation. Breathe in deep the breath of life and be here now. If you have come into this fellowship hurting today, wounded in spirit, rest here. If you have come cut by the 1,000 tiny aggressions of the world, rest here. This fellowship can hold you up. That which is greater than us, God and love, with the human spirit, life itself, is strong enough to hold us up, even when we're tired, weak, and worn. Rest easy. We're all hurting and we're all hoping. We're all wounded and we're all walking together. Our words for meditation are from Dr. King. There are certain things in our nation and in the world to which I am proud to be maladjusted, and which I hope all men of goodwill will be maladjusted until the good societies realize. I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism, to self-defeating effects of physical violence. It is 56 years later. It is 160 years later. It is 400 years later. 2,000 years later. It is the whole of human history behind us, and still we are struggling to make real love's aspirations of justice. We are walking toward a land we may not reach. Let us be more ethical than expedient, more courageous than cautious. We are powerful. This is our prayer today, to use our power to heal the world. This morning, think of someone you know who needs love, family and friends who you want to lift up, those with a hardened heart you hope will thaw, people struggling one day at a time, yourself, perhaps. Think of someone you know who you want to lift up in love in this community and hold their names in your heart.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. Flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. Flowing in my soul. Yeah, there's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul. Flowing in my soul.
As a community minister, I will often serve as a guest preacher for my colleagues on their Sundays away. Recently, I led a service about gender, the constructs of the gender binary, the social, political, and justice aspects, and pronoun usage. Following the service, a congregant approached me and suggested that every person should use the pronoun they. Well, both problematic and unpragmatic in a number of ways, I do what I always try to do, presume best intent and seek to understand. Perhaps he was leveraging his power as a straight white upper middle class man. Societal change requires action from those with power. But it wasn't quite that. He fervently believed that believing in another person's dignity and worth meant believing there were no meaningful differences. He would not let the issue go. He got more and more animated, almost to the point of anger, insisting he was right. And if we worked hard enough for long enough, the whole world would agree with him. But there is no difference, he said. I don't see you as a woman or him as a man. I see you as people. And I don't see color. Everyone is the same to me. I don't see color. Curiously, that is something I have never heard from a person of color. It's an understanding of race and power, or a lack of understanding, that can only be born from a place of privilege. It's called minimization. So often in UU churches, Martin Luther King Day is a feel-good holiday. We celebrate the wins of the civil rights era, of Black Lives Matter. Often it's implicitly a self-congratulatory Sunday. We're on the right side of history, on the side of justice, the side of love. The ability to stand in that place is a place that's not generally complicated by being a victim of racism in church or after church. There's generally a nod to the fact that more work needs to be done, but often the tone is a feel-good complacency born of security and comfort. The trouble is this kind of minimization erases people of color's history, trauma, and experience. It also erases their present experiences, the possibilities of healing, a hope in the future, and a transformed country. And it also erases our own complicity. It creates a seductively comfortable illusion in which there's no one to blame. And if we don't see a problem, we can't be the problem, nor can we be the solution. I moved to Southside Chicago just over 10 years ago and received some of the most important education of my life. I still have a lot to learn. When we first moved there, we lived in the privileged bubble of the neighborhood of Hyde Park. We later moved further south. Hyde Park is a 1.6 square mile neighborhood of more than 30,000 people. It's a Black upper middle class neighborhood. It was the Obama's neighborhood. It's largely comprised of the University of Chicago campus. For the first time in my life, I was the minority, though I still retained all of my racial privilege. Now, when I say white privilege, I'm saying that we live in a society in which systematic injustice, often invisible to white people, stacks the deck against people of color at every turn, especially young Black men. If you've had the privilege to travel to a foreign country, then you've had the opportunity to see our own culture with fresh eyes. No one can see the water they're swimming in. That's true for white culture and for white privilege. It comes up in small ways. Not long after we moved to the neighborhood, I had to find a place to get my son Matthew's haircut. So I found a barbershop with great Google reviews, and I was charmed to see from the shop window they had encased one chair in glass. It had been President Obama's chair. I figured if the barber shop was good enough for President Obama, it was more than good enough for Matthew. So I walked in with Matthew. Matthew was 3. All conversation in the shop stopped. Everyone stared at us in stunned silence. Unbeknownst to me, I had broken a few very important cultural rules. A Black barbershop is an institution for Black men. It is where friendship, networking, connection, business is conducted. The barber is often also the therapist and knows all the things going on in the neighborhood. I had not yet learned any of these things. It was a safe and almost sacred place. After what felt like an eternity, the barber asked, "Can I help you?" Figuring it was not the time to leave either, I awkwardly asked if we could get a haircut for Matthew. And he graciously took Matthew into the chair. He had no reason to do so. The other men in the shop started talking, mostly to be polite, clearly not the conversations they were having before I opened the door. And he began cutting his hair, and it became immediately apparent he didn't know how to cut white hair. It turned out well enough. But more importantly, I left with a newfound understanding and respect, and gratitude to have been allowed to blunder and to learn, and to realize how much I didn't know. Of course, I'd heard of people of color who lived in a white neighborhood, not able to find a hairdresser who knew how to style their hair, let alone being able to walk in a shop without profound scrutiny. Black spaces are often sacred spaces in the community, institutions, businesses that center their culture, experiences, needs, and safety. Be not mistaken, this is more than haircuts. These are life and death issues. Right about that same time, I was at a small gathering of African American women in the neighborhood. One woman was grieving the loss of her teenage nephew who had been shot. Every other woman in that room, except me, personally knew that grief. It's a commonplace event in the Black community in Southside Chicago. Now, if I went into a room of white women and said my nephew was shot, I'd have people racing up to me in shock and disbelief. That's white privilege. The next summer, my husband, Reverend David, and I had the privilege to serve as ministers of the week at the Life on a Star retreat located on Star Island. Star Island hosts a UU retreat. It's a UU retreat and conference center that hosts all sorts of different programs. It's about 10 miles off of the coast of New Hampshire. It's rocky, windswept, rustic, and beautiful. While on the island, I was unplugged, and we settled into the rhythm of the conference. It's a bit of a misnomer. We had a speaker for the conference, but it was more like a summer camp for families. Meanwhile, Ferguson erupted in outrage at the police shooting of the unarmed Black teenage boy, who then became a household name, Michael Brown. We live in a society that has made it possible for a police officer to kill an innocent kid like Michael Brown, and for people to argue about whether he deserved it because he stole some cigars for $50. It was in those years I learned an African-American person with an English surname is the descendant of a slave. I was embarrassed I had never put the 2 and 2 together. That ignorance, white privilege. Brown is not an African name. We may have made great progress in slavery and huge strides in the civil rights movements, But the same force that degraded African people to mere property dehumanized Michael Brown into just another expendable Black kid. That's systemic racism. It's fatal racism. White privilege is the fact that I don't have to worry about my son Matthew being shot walking out of the convenience store, even if he steals $50 worth of cigars. He's a kid who's going to be about that same size as Big Mike. I can't help but think about my time on that island as a metaphor of white privilege. I could choose to stay on that metaphorical island even after I return to the mainland. It's heavy stuff. And what can we really do? Religion writer Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch interviewed his colleague and friend from seminary, the Reverend Tony Lee. Reverend Lee is an African-American pastor at an African Methodist Episcopal church in Maryland. He called his friend and asked him what the church should do. Reverend Lee offered some practical steps, but when Rauschenbusch pressed his old friend and colleague about how white Americans should show solidarity, here is what he said. We need to lock arms amidst all of this. If the police feel they are above the law with any one group, they will feel they are above the law with the others. We need to learn from the civil rights movement. It wasn't just Black folks, and this is a Black man speaking. It was everybody. Because it wasn't a Black problem. It was a moral issue. We are remembering years after the Freedom Summer. This wasn't just Black people risking their lives. It was a community that went down to Mississippi because they knew that when any group within the nation is marginalized, we can't be the nation we want to be. Rauschenbusch concludes, in short, we should show up together. And it is also true that until we show up together, that change won't happen. Some Unitarian ministers showed up for the March on Selma, arm in arm with the Black folks marching. You may know the story of the Reverend James Reeb. He was the white Unitarian minister from Boston who marched for civil rights in Selma. He was beaten to death by white segregationists. Here's what Dr. King said upon Reeb's death. Naturally, we are compelled to ask the question, who killed James Reeb? The answer is simple and rather limited when we think of the who. He was murdered by a few sick, demented, and misguided men who have the strange notion that you express dissent through murder. There is another haunting, poignant, desperate question that we are forced to ask this afternoon that I asked a few days as we funeralized James Jackson. What killed James Reeb? When we move from the who to the what, the blame is wide and the responsibility grows. James Reeb was murdered by the indifference of every minister of the gospel who has remained silent behind the safe security of stained glass windows. He was murdered by the irrelevancy of a church who will stand amid social evil and serve as a taillight rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. It is also painfully true that it took the murder of a white New England minister to more fully catch the country's attention in a way that the murder of a Black man couldn't, and that's still true today. We have a choice to do the work, to show up together, to be a church, an association that stays relevant, that stands amid social evil and serves as a headlight rather than a taillight, that serves not as an echo, but a voice. There is more love somewhere. Let us keep on till we find it, till we can help make it so. May it be so, and amen.
There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep
That's the First Unitarian Brooklyn Choir. In the days and hours after the murder of Michael Brown, protesters held signs that said, "Hands up, don't shoot." That is also what some of the football players in our opening hymn were doing. And I have to say, my colleague across the alley, a Reverend doctor of the Disciples of Christ Church, a light-skinned Black woman, as we were talking about traffic stops, she's about my age, said every single time she stopped, not often, she immediately has her hands up. We can hold up in defense to say we are innocent without arms. And we can hold up our hands to say stop, to protest. And we can hold up our hands to bless. Hold your hands up and go forth to bless the world.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we
I've extinguished our chalice. Thank you for worshiping together with me. I'm glad we could come together today. Go in peace this week and be a blessing. And thanks again for your immense patience with the technical issues at the beginning of the service. Take care. See you next month.